You want to see how I converted a new for 2022 Be a Freyed Clocksmith into a functioning clock with glowing eyes? Stay tuned to the video and you can see that it is actually a functioning clock. Here comes the light. There's the second hand moving for you because you won't see the minutes or hour moving very fast. But there it is. So stay tuned to see how I converted a solid porcelain house into a fully functional clock for my display that I'll have on all year round. This time on Captain Cass's laboratory, we're going to work on a new piece, or we're going to modify it. It's the Be a Freyed Clocksmith new for 2022. This is a lit building where it has the hole for the light bulb. I don't use those, I make my own. So they're low voltage that they run on the 4.5 volt adapters, where they can use the 3-headed ones. So the building showed up a few days ago, and a while back on the Village Idiots podcast from Spooky Villages, Doug mentioned that this is a building that I might be able to modify. So I'm going to take him up on that suggestion. Let's see if we can make the hands work. The hands are just stuck on. It looks like there's just a center where they're attached, and possibly there's 2 indentations right there. It looks like they might be stippled into the skull. And while I'm in here, I want to look to see if maybe I can drill out the 2 red eyes and replace them with LEDs. That's a maybe. I'm not sure. Possibly won't be able to. Now, I don't know if I want to try and make the clock work where it tells time, which means I'd have to be able to change the battery, or anytime I turn power on, it would have to be reset. Or if I just want to make it spin, so the hands just rotate around like some of the other clock pieces they had over the years, where they had just rotating hands on the clocks. This piece has a little clock that goes right here, and it doesn't stay in, it just falls right out. It's not even remotely close to tight. So I mean, it may just be the one I got, but if you have it, I'm just going to put a drop of glue on mine and glue it in. Probably a drop of hot glue. You can possibly use some like Teflon tape, stick it on the top post, shove it in there, use it as a wedge. My display's up all year round. I've never taken it down, even when I've had to move it. It was never put back in its boxes, it was just moved as pieces. But, so let's see what we can do about getting this off, and if I can, turn it into a working clock. I was at the Goodwill. I never pass up deals. I bought this. It's a Sherwin-Williams. It's a clock, but it looks like a tombstone. I thought maybe painting this and texturing it to look like stone would be kind of cool. And it opens up, and inside is a clock. Look at that. So this clock, if you notice, clock faces are pretty close to the same size. I'm not going to cut this whole thing out. I was going to see, because this one, the second hand fell off. It's right there on the bottom now. About unscrewing this and seeing if I can get this micro clock mechanism out and make it fit through the center of here. The reason I call this a micro clock mechanism is a standard clock mechanism. The mechanism in the back takes a AA. Some of them are AAA, but the majority are AA. And they're much larger than this. This uses smaller gears, and it's a much smaller face. So I just refer to these as the micro style because they're really small, and you can see there's no battery. You have to put in a button cell right here. So I think when I bought this was a couple years ago. It's been sitting on my bench. I've never got around to painting it. I think I tested this and it did work, except for the second hand would get wedged if it wasn't all the way at the bottom. And even at the bottom, sometimes the hour hand would, or excuse me, the minute hand would smack it. So we're gonna see if we can make that work. But before we get even that far, let's see if we can pop this thing out right here. Like I said, I can flex the hour hand and I can see it lifting, but I'm not sure how they have it attached in the center. Now when I look in through here, there's nothing protruding through on the back side of the porcelain. So I'm assuming this hour hand is held in place with the two stimples, and then the minute hand is pushed through the center of it and is pushed into a hole into the porcelain, probably either wedged or glued. So the hour hand, I have a funny feeling those two stimples are holding it, and then the minute hand doesn't. It has a stimple, but it's smooth on the bottom. So I think it's just a casting. So let's see if we can get this thing apart, possibly modify this. I'm going to use snips. I'm not going to use them as snips. I'm going to try and use them to pry. Because of the wedge, I might be able to get underneath the edges of this and see if I can get any movement on the... Okay. Apparently prying on the center just removes the clock face. And now you can see the porcelain behind it. So yeah, new for 2022. We're just going to glue a piece of plastic onto the front. Okay. So let's move the back. What kind of glue is this? This is hard glue, so it's probably a super glue, type of super glue. It's not flexible or soft, and it's so it's not hot glue. But now I can see the back, and then one of these stimples lines up with this hole right here. I don't know if it goes all the way through, so let's use a screwdriver. No, it doesn't. It's a blind hole. So. And of course, while doing this, I don't want to damage the skull paint. I don't want to break a $50 house. And yes, the hour hand does actually protrude into the plastic. I can see that. It's got a pin that goes through. There's a hole in the center of his head. So I might try some heat. Let me get a closer look. Yeah, it looks like it might be glued on. So let's try some heat. I don't want to get it too hot because again, this is just plastic. There we go. So using heat works. It was glued. You can see some of the white paint that was still attached. So either it was glued or it was put on when the paint was wet. And now we can see the hole in the middle of the forehead as well as the hole where his nose would be. And this is one solid piece. This is not two hands that are pinned together. This is cast as one solid piece. So let's see if it's modifiable. Let's see if we can take this clock apart without losing all of its components. This is something that definitely takes these magnifiers to see, because this thing is real small. I'm trying to get this gear put back onto its pin so it doesn't get lost. You can see how small those teeth are, how small those gears are. Right now I'm trying to get this face out. This guy, I don't want to lose it, so I'm going to take it out. There's the inner workings. There's all the hands. I'm going to see if I can pop this bezel out, which looks like there's a clip. Looking through, looks like there's a little clip right in here. Try and pop the plastic out. Right there. And I get to the hands. Alright, let's see if I can get this thing back together again. Come on. There's a little clip that the off-on switch clips into. And I kind of need it because if it's not all the way over to the on position, it doesn't press the metal bar down. And actually, could just solder that down and then I don't have to have this piece on the bottom. And then that way the clock's always on. I don't know why you'd want to turn it off anyway. It doesn't have an alarm, it's just a clock. So, yeah, why don't I do that? Just going to solder it down, and then I don't have to worry about the off-on switch. So I'm going to put a little flux on here, Yeah. Grab some solder. That. The solder, I tinned it, and now I'm soldering it down to the circuit board. I'm using the tweezers to push the springed metal down, and now it's soldered. So technically it's always on, which is usually how I want my clocks anyway. I'm going to use the face to keep it elevated, to keep knocking this center out, because the part that the hand spin on keeps pushing up. And now, of course, all the gears fell out. Of course. So now we'll try and figure out how these all went in. There. Oh, that's not good. Just lost the gear. Alright, bear with me. I'm going to try and find a gear that shot out of my tweezers and get this clock together. I'll be right back. Sorry for this. Alright, it's back together. I found all the parts and it actually works. The reason the second hand fell off is because the little pin, I get this thing off my mat, that's supposed to be on the back, is stuck in the dead center. So that's why the second hand wasn't attached. I've screwed it back together. I've had it working with power off my power supply, and I've been watching the minute hand move. So it is now back to fully functional, which I was thinking about it going, it probably doesn't need to be since I don't run power to this all the time. The only issue I'm going to run into at the moment, which makes me want to probably go buy a new mechanism from the store, is they sell these with a long nose and a short nose. This is a short nose. Is if I use this watch face, it's not one, long enough to protrude through, and two, I'd have to cut a really big hole in this porcelain for this to fit behind it. Whereas if I got a long nose, I could just drill a hole through the center, drill a hole through the center of the porcelain, and then screw it in to like so. So I don't have any more replacement clock mechanisms that I know of. But I'm going to go scavenge through my stuff, because I am somebody that has a clock or two or 7 in every room, just the way I've been most of my life, and see if I have an old one I don't care for anymore that I can that has a long nose, because it'd be really neat to have this thing actually keep time, but I don't want it to keep time correctly. I just want it to keep time when I give it power, so I'm going to wire it up to that 4.5 volt incoming power supply. What I also noticed by taking this off is if I do drill out these two eyes, once I put this back on, because there's an alignment bar right here for this groove right here. Try and bring it a little bit more into camera. So there's a line right here. So this aligns it so it's straight up and down. I can then drill pilot holes through his eyes, or hers, I don't know, into the porcelain, and have the LEDs actually attached in here and recessed behind this plastic. So I might still do that. Now, as it tells time, it's going to look weird because there's going to be a hole in the center of the skull. I could try and fill that with some off-white paint, or just leave it there. It's not horribly noticeable. Or you can say that's how this guy died. He was shot in the center of his head. I have no idea. But I do know that by the time I'm done, this is going to have a moving clock. That's the whole point. I'm going to have to go through a couple of different ideas, but we're going to get it. That is the point. So I'm going to go see what I got lying around for clock face that I can strip. Clock faced hands with a long nose. And my only other issue at that point is going to be, how am I going to get this clock mechanism in the itty bitty little hole right there? Well, when I got this sticker with all the clocks in there was peeling in the corner, which you can put your finger in there and fix. Or you can unglue it and remove the bottom. So you can see the bottom is held in with glue. If I pop the bottom out, I should be able to fit a mechanism up inside, line it up, spin that nut on. I can even grind a little bit of this out so the nut's recessed, so the clock face fits flush. So, and we'll go from there. And then we'll make a light that goes in here as well with the adapter that runs the LEDs, the clock face, and illuminates the inside, so you can see the guy sitting at the bench, as well as illuminate behind the skeleton of a crow. Also, I don't know if anybody else has got this, but they did a horrible job gluing on this window. It's only glued on two and a half of the three sides, or four sides. This side and halfway here isn't attached. Also, like I said, my clock decal in the back was peeled when I got it, so I just stuck my finger in there. And I don't know if you guys have noticed this either, but look at that horrible casting overcast. See that right in there? I started chipping some of it off. I got the top two off. I haven't been able to get the bottom ones off. And I don't want to crack the porcelain here. All the windows are like that if you put your finger inside. I'm just looking at when you look through the window, those are really obvious. I don't like that. So if I take the bottom out, I might try and clean that up. Alright, so we're going to stop for a moment, and I'm going to try and find myself a clock mechanism. Then we'll start back up. Alright, I went and looked and couldn't find any clock faces that I had flying around, so I just went and quickly bought one. This, of course, is much larger. It's also a square, but it's a slightly bigger face. So this one, just like I would have to before, I'm going to have to remove this bottom and slide it through. But this style clock face allows you the length to get through an object. And of course, it's made for a hanging clock. So, and you can see the distance, whereas that's really shallow. I mean, this still works. If I put a battery in it, it still turns. Just the second hand won't work because the pins broke off inside. So it'll just go into a pile of stuff for a future potential project. It's the random junk name. So, and this should fit perfect. As you can see, the size is fine. So, need to drill a hole in this, and big enough for that to stick through. I'm going to go through my selection of flat nuts and make a spacer, or put a couple of washers, or yeah, a nut with maybe a washer or two. So I don't want this sticking out to full length. It's going to look funny. Even though this is going to be on the front, I'm going to drill this one out too. That's just a lot of distance. So now, to drill through porcelain, ceramic, etc., you need carbide. A carbide bit. So other hand, and then there are new hands in here, right here. Probably use those. That's why I didn't throw the package away. I just set it off to the side. So Again, one day while I was shopping at the Goodwill, came across a partial kit of carbide bits. Let's see there. Oop. It's mostly complete. There's one stuck to the foam. So those are different carbide bit set for drills, routers, and microscribes. So, because this is a ceramic porcelain, this is what you want to use. You don't have to get a micro bit set like this. You can get full-size drill bits over at the Home Depot, even if you want to attempt this project. Don't get me wrong, this is not going to be an easy one. So I'm going to look for something to start a pilot hole. This guy looks good. I'm just going to use a battery-operated drill. What I'm going to do is I'm going to drill through here so I can use this as the center line for that. So you shouldn't have a problem drilling through the plastic. It's carbide. It might gum it up a hair, but it shouldn't have an issue. Pretty damn close to center too. So, see if I can get some of this hard glue off real fast. But taking the hard glue off will allow me to recess the spacer into the groove to make sure I'm in the center. The thing about hard glue is if you heat it, it doesn't mean it comes off easier. Usually it comes off harder. So hard glue, I just try and peel and chip. As you see, it's coming off in relatively large sheets. Sometimes it comes off in smaller pieces, but hard glue is very resistive to heat, and it's actually sometimes makes it worse. That's why I always check the kinds of glue and determine whether I'm going to try and separate it with heat or without. That's why I call it cracking, because the cracking you hear is this hard glue. As you can hear, it's very audible. Like so. So, set this down. I'm going to use this foam to help put a little vibration absorption right there. So now this will fit flusher. There is still some lateral movement, but I can see where the lines are and I can just push it down. And hopefully, based on the mark, it should have a mark on the back. I do. It's a really, really shallow mark, but it's there. So the mark is right here. So just going to use this again to help keep me in my center line. Pretty tough stuff. I just want to make it a little bit deeper before I continue without the plastic, and I'm sorry for the noise because I'm sure the microphone is picking up the squealing from the grinding of the porcelain. Change her out for a different bit. Now, I haven't drilled something this fragile ever. I've drilled through tile, which is not as fragile. So I'm going to look for a different kind of bit. Let's try this guy. Nope, this guy is not made for a drill. Too big. So this is going to be a trial and error build for modification. Yeah, it's pretty thick right there. Yeah, there's a hump of casting on the back. I'm feeling in the back and put my finger inside. But you can see it's making a mark. So this is going to take some time. After I get this one going through, I'm going to go to a bigger one, and then I'm going to use a grinding one to try and hone the hole out. But this is going to take some time because I got to do it carefully due to the fact it's porcelain. I don't want to shatter my house. I prefer not to shatter my house. So bear with me for a moment or continue watching. Might try and speed up the footage a little bit. There we go. So, yeah, it took some time. There's my center hole. Let's not touch the tip because I'm sure it's smoking hot. Alright. Here's a bigger one that has a grinding edge. I don't know if you can see that in the camera. So hopefully I can make the hole bigger and then use it to grind out the ceramic porcelain material. There's the bigger hole. Let's see. Looking to see if I have one that's the biggest one I have that'll fit. So that one's bigger. And then I'll check my Dremel to sometimes they come with carbide bits that I can use to hone the hole out to make it the size of the clock. Because I need a hole that fits this. That's a much larger. So I don't know how many have changed out clock mechanisms, but so that's a wood bit. It's probably the biggest for the micro bits, so I'm probably gonna have to go change to a Dremel bit that's bigger to continue this process. But as you can see so far, this is where we're at. I now have a hole that will hopefully make it this big, and you can see by putting the nut over it how much larger that has to be. Also, because I want this still to sit flush, I'm going to have to trace this nut out and then drill out a hole partially into this plastic, not to where it goes through. Jeez, not to where it goes through and tears up his face. So I need to also notch this when I'm done, so this still sits flush onto the porcelain backing. I kind of wish they would have painted the backing, because even with the clock all the way down, right here in the corner, you can see where they didn't paint, right there. So I wish they would have painted this better, because if you've got one that has a clock sitting high, you can see both sides. If you've got one the clock sits low, you can see the one side. You know, I mean, I could probably hit that with a little paint or a Sharpie just to darken it. So there we go at the moment. Primary or pilot starter hole is done. Now it's time to change tools. So I'll be back in a moment once I get the next tool in here, and we'll try and get that hole to this size. Then we'll deal with this and then soldering wires to this, so that way I don't have to run a battery. As reaching in here every time to change the battery would be a pain in the butt. So this is a 1.5 volt single AA, negative positive. I'll just solder some wires on here, run them down and out the light hole, and then we'll make it around 4.5 volts. I'll change the resistor, or I'll add a resistor to change the power this thing draws, so that way that doesn't burn up the mechanism. I don't really care if I run it a little too fast. The clock will only be spinning when the unit's on, and I'm not going to have the hand spin fast. I'll actually be spinning at clock speed. So I'll turn in a moment with the Dremel. Alright, I'm back. I have a tapered carbide bit, and then I have a ball burnisher carbide bit. I'm going to start with this and see if I can make the hole bigger and then work our way around. So this is a 5-speed Dremel, so we'll see how this works. Alright, so that went all the way through. So now we got a much larger hole, still not big enough. Again, sorry for the noise. When this is edited, hopefully we can put some noise reduction so it's not deafening to those who might listen on the headphone set. So I'm going to try and make the hole bigger with this first before I use that, because this is a finer tooth. It takes less material off, but also creates less vibration. Vibration is what causes fracturing, and also that can grab, and if it grabs it can throw the piece and then of course break it. Don't have to hopefully remind you that when you do something like this, eye protection and ear protection if you're not doing it outside, because what you hear on the camera I hear here, and the camera reduces the sound because it has a noise canceling feature. It's not pleasant for the ears. So now let's see if I can hone this out to this size. just to give me an idea of what I have to remove, which is quite a bit of material. Just outside of that green is what I have to grind out. So we're going to keep the camera going just in case this thing explodes into pieces and I ruined a brand new piece. Hopefully it doesn't, but we're going to find out. We might speed it up a little bit in editing, just so if this takes 20 minutes, you can watch it in maybe 10 versus waiting forever. There you go. So I think that was something like 20 minutes total to get to this point. Oh, apparently I broke the scythe. Alright, a little glue will fix that. So now I need to make that hole, same size as this as well. But since we already drilled a pilot hole, which you can see comes out right there in the center, I'm just going to use this to punch through, and then I'll probably use this to make the hole bigger. Careful. Excuse me. You should probably put this on a piece of wood and do it so that way it starts smoking the wood and you don't slip and stab your hand. I'm just going to hold her and keep my finger spread on the back and notch it, but I'm not going to run at full speed. So now I got the hole all the way through. And now I need to do the same thing where I'm going to have to make the hole bigger. I'll probably just eyeball it. I'm going to do it from the back so I can see better because it's a flat surface, not textured. And you can see how this gums up the bit. That's the only thing that sucks about doing plastic. Let me see if I can clean this off. See what other things I got in here that I can cut this with. What you heard me grinding on was a chunk of aluminum. I was using aluminum to clean the teeth because it's a soft metal and allows for cleaning of the carbide because it's a softer metal than the carbide. Most things are softer than carbide, to be truthful. So there we go. Let's try the ball here. I think this should work decently. If not, I have a much, much larger kit that has about 7 different styles of this. Speaking of that aluminum, this is the chunk of aluminum. It's a heatsink. Probably use that since I can put it between the fins and grind. Probably put it here on the end where it's the larger fin. Safety, you know. Don't want YouTube saying I'm doing something unsafe. Kind of hard to do no matter what angle I do it on. It's hard to see because the plastic fills the hole back up. So that's why I keep moving around. I might just set it flat on my bench, and if I hit the bench, I hit the bench. But it's getting there. It almost fits over the threads. It's just a messy process. See, it should fit, but if it doesn't, I'm going to use the thread lines I'm making with it to it actually works pretty good right there. Now, if I leave it like this, if there's enough gap, I can probably get those LEDs in here. I think this house would look cool if it had LEDs. Trying to do this as a full through process so that way you can see how it's done if you want to do it yourself with little breaks, but I have to stop to go get tools if I need to get something special from a different room. And it is a much larger hole. It does take out the bridge of his nose and all that, but when this is put in and the hands are on, you're not going to see that like a typical clock. So now my next question is can I put LEDs in here? Oh, plus I need to recess this nut. Maybe. If I can get this to where I can leave this as a thread on, where I cut the threads using its the shaft, I could use the face as the front threads to hold the clock mechanism, and I don't have to use the jam nut right here. So that means I don't have to recess anything because it's, like you can see, I'm flexing the disc. So I think using this threaded, because you can see you kind of see the grooves cut into it from the shaft, we might just go that route. Anytime you do something custom, you have to make modifications along the way. Now let's separate this bottom so we can get the mechanism in there, see how much room I have, and see if I can actually put LEDs in here. Now, this is also hard glue. This isn't hot glue. So I'm going to try and just slowly pry on it first. And if that doesn't work, I'll try and heat it up and see if it gives a little. But they backfilled this thing a lot. They really didn't want this to fall out. And it's in there pretty good. Let's see. Slightly smaller screwdriver. I'm just finding one that will try and fit the easiest. That one fits the best. There we go. It's not breaking the porcelain. That was the glue cracking, just echoing inside the hollowness of the unit. So no, broke the resin. So this is resin. As you can see, it just cracked. So I'm going to turn on the heater and see if I can get this to soften up. And then I'll use hard glue to fix this piece that chunked out. I'm not terribly concerned. It's the bottom. You're not going to see it. And it's mine. So this is more just to show you how to do it if you want to try it yourself. There we go. Sorry, my nozzle was coming off, and it's already hot, so I'm not going to touch it. Pump up the volume. Alright. So yeah, apparently heating it probably would have been the smarter way to go. Because this actually did break down. But the problem with heating is you risk melting this resin. But that's what the inside looks like. And get the debris out, and that's what the inside looks like. Oh, I swear I'd lose everything if I... Where did I put that nut? There it is. I'll use that as a depth gauge, and this fits in. Now comes the tricky part. Now, if you got smaller hands, this might be easy for you. Or if you have really good dexterity, but I don't. That's why I have these. So, I'm going to grab it by its hook, which means it's upside down, but I don't really care, because I'm not going for right side up, so upside down, none of that crap, because I don't care if the clock tells correct time or not. I just want to see if I have enough protruding through that I can thread the face on, which I do not. Now, if you do decide to do something similar to this, use 2 of these nuts if you don't want to make it thread on like I am doing. That way you can put one on the front and one on the back for a depth gauge. And that should be enough thread. it's not still. It catches and skips. So, one more try. So, just back it down another 2 threads and stick her through. Once I get it started, I can use my finger through the light hole to hold the mechanism against the porcelain house, and I should be able to screw it on. Just nothing to grab on this clock face. There we go. It's almost on. And turn the clock face right side up. And there's the mechanism sticking through. There it is on the bottom. Hopefully you can see it in there. And I do have a gap, so I might be able to do the LED eyes. I need the gap for the wires to feed through and the LED leads to feed through the porcelain, so I have to drill a couple more holes. But I needed to put this clock face on to make sure I had enough of a gap. Now when I actually put this on, I am going to put some glue behind it to hold it in place, because I'll probably never take it back out unless the mechanism fails. Which clock mechanisms seem to last forever, and this will only be on when my display is on. So I'm not too overly concerned about it. So, but while I'm in here, I am going to clean up this casting right there, because like I said, it drives me nuts that they have it. Now I will have to stop and get the LED and the wiring and all that jazz, but I don't have any of them out because I wasn't sure I'd have the room. But the majority of this has been straight through for you, at least the dangerous part of drilling through your ceramic. Wow. Apparently it's caught. There we go. So, make this thing work and look good. And like I said, this was brought up from a podcast from Doug over at Spooky Villages and his Idiot podcast. And when I saw this, I was thinking this thing definitely needed an upgrade. What I was doing off camera to clean that off is right here on the edge, fire it up again. And that's how I clean off carbide really quickly, is I find a hard material to clean it Doesn't always work, but if you do it shortly after you do your cutting, you can get away with it on the rotary tools. Saw blades are a different story. So, all right, so now he's got 2 big holes for his eyes, and same thing. Now I'm gonna put this back down using that plastic to keep me centered, and then I'm going to make a pilot mark. See the dot and the dot. Those are the pilot marks from that bit. I won't use this to plunge through the porcelain. It'll create too much vibration and too much heat. So I'm going to go back to the actual porcelain bits. Or carbide bits. Sorry, not porcelain bits. They're just carbide bits. Go with a slightly smaller one to make the pilot hole first. This guy, right here. Actually, because these are also designed for the Dremel, and the Dremel spins at a higher RPM than the drill, let's try the Dremel, see if it makes it any faster. This bit's getting hot. I guess this wasn't the bit I used originally. So let's try a different bit. Not only is it getting hot, it's stuck. go. This one's vibrating too much. I'm trying to get these to punch through, but do it carefully so I don't cause a fracture between the two smaller holes and the bigger hole in the middle. But I can't find a bit that I like the way it's cutting. Once it punches through, it'll be fine. It's the punch through that I have to get accomplished. I need to do it without any damage. That one might work. So. Huh, that one just broke. Alright. See, that's the problem with the vibration when you're cutting through something that's hard and brittle, especially ceramic and porcelains. They're really strong stuff. Is the vibration actually snapped the bit, so it's no longer good. I'm sure when this bit was brand new, kit was very expensive. This was only $6 or whatever at the Goodwill, so. But my goal is not to break them. My goal is to get this job done so I can have a unique functioning house. Alright, this bit broke too, but I just used the broken piece to force my way through, and it did. So, this has cost me 2 carbide bits so far, plus a watch face. Or a clock face, not a watch face. There we go. Now, where is my... It's over here. So now I'm going to make the holes just go all the way through, and they'll fit the small 3mm LEDs. Vibrations are breaking off that overcasting. That's the thing about vibrations. That's why I'm trying to keep them at a minimum. down by using a buffer and changing the bits and changing the speeds. So, I'm going to see if I can get the rest of this window ground off real fast while I got the bit attached and out. What I did was I just cut a groove into them so I can snap them out like that. So that way my window's cleaner right there where the casting was. Alright, so now I have my holes all the way through. So now I just need to find my LEDs I want to use, get some wire solder to them so I can get them down, get some wire solder to the watch or clock face mechanism, and we'll continue. So I know this is super exciting, but sometimes when you do modifications it takes some time, you gotta be patient. I shouldn't need these bits anymore. I think I'm done modifying the porcelain or ceramic part. So I'm gonna go get the rest of the materials I need so that way we can get this finished up and get a functional clock mechanism in here. And technically you could use this as a all year round clock. I have one that I made out of a Michaels clock a few years back that still it runs 24/7 unless we have a power outage, where I added LEDs and stuff to the base. The clock though runs on a battery. The actual clock face runs on a AAA. So I mean, you could make this into a real functional clock and just have it sitting on in your display that has power all the time, and you have a fully functional clock. So, all right, so I'm gonna clean up some of this mess, find the piece that chipped off, and get out the LEDs I need because they're currently buried under some other projects, and get all the resistors and stuff I need, and we'll get this done. Alright, so I got 2 red LEDs. I spread them out and soldered them real quick, and how I did it, because I didn't think about filming it, was I put the LEDs upside down in the holes, like so, and then I bent the lead so I know they'll clear the center, and soldered the positive to the negative, and then I got a 100 ohm resistor, because on free float the power supply is put out basically 5 volts, so I have my power supply set at 5 volts, and if you put direct power to this at 5 volts, those 2 LEDs will no longer cease to exist. So put the 100 ohm resistor, and I'll pull them out so you can actually see them, and I'll actually put them on the right side. Grip it. There we go. Come on. There we go. Oh, you can see the two lights. My thumb's probably blocking it. So, there. So, those will be the eyes. I'll stick them in from the back. And I'll probably just put a dab of hot glue, or I might just force them in there and let this mechanism push them flat against where I don't need any adhesive. But, yeah. So 100 ohm resistor at 5 volts makes it about as bright as I want it. Anything less than that makes them overly bright and it'll shorten their lifespan. So I'm going to go ahead and hook the resistor up to the positive side. It doesn't matter which side you stick it on. Oh, probably helps if I turn on my soldering iron. But that's how I set it up, is I got 2 LEDs, because I wanted to see how they glowed through, so I quickly soldered them together to try and hold them inside. Because I don't want the LEDs to protrude through the eyes. I just want them to make those holes glow. I don't want the LEDs to protrude through like they do with a lot of their products. I wanted them recessed. So I needed to see if the depth, angle, to bend the leads. To bend the leads, I just used the needle tweezers and folded them over real quick. So, but using the ceramic to get my spacing was important, because the plastic holes are actually too small, so I couldn't use the plastic, and also the plastic moved around too much for me to actually do anything. So now with it soldered together, you should be able to just clip it on and they'll glow for you without me trying to hold them with my fingers. Click. There we go. So we can line them up. It'll kind of give you that appearance. Hopefully it looks okay in the camera. I can't see with the white light right next to it. So now I'm going to solder on some wire. I have some scrap wire laying here that I'm probably just going to end up using. You can use any wire you want. Apparently I only have one piece of scrap wire laying here. That's fine. I'll just cut this in half. It's not a big deal to me. This is a very thin solid core. It's the stuff they used to make telephone wire out of. Actually, they still make telephone wire out of it. This was just a spool of just a single strand for patchwork and repairs. If you watch other videos, I've used it before. I don't like to use it because it's solid core, but I don't want anything heavy in here to get in the way of the clock mechanism. And there's not going to be a lot of movement. Once it's all soldered together, it isn't going to move. It's not going to be in there taking things apart and putting them back together constantly. So what I was doing just now, if you haven't seen any previous videos, it was tinning the area. That way I have solder on both ends and I can just press them together with the soldering iron until they melt and it forms a nice bond. Give it a second to cool. The other problem with solid core is when you go to move it, it likes to jump around because it's springy. It's not the greatest solder joint. Let's fix that. That's a little bit better. So, there we go. Now with the 100 ohm resistor being attached to the LEDs, I don't need to put a resistor on the circuit board I'm going to put in the back here. So I can wire this or solder this directly to the incoming power. Now my display, I turn each piece on by turning on a big switch, and it turns on each section. So I'm not too concerned about power consumption, as well as independently turning stuff off and on. So there we go. There's the lights. Now the lights I got to feed through and stick in, and then I got to solder to the back of this, a negative and a positive, and figure out resistance for how much this draws. So I'm going to see what this clock mechanism draws by setting this for 1.5 volts. We'll do 1.8 because a brand new battery is 1.8 volts on average. Some are a little bit less. It's clicking away, and it is drawing so little power it doesn't even recognize it. She is clicking. You know what, just to show you, let me put the second hand on. Hopefully you can see it moving there. So this draws almost no power. So we'll have to use Ohm's law to figure out what resistor to run from 5 volts down to, say, 1.8 volts or 1.5 volts. So that way we can get the movement. Like I said, my display is only on for maybe 20 minutes at a time, so most of this clock face is only going to spin very, very small increments, but it's going to be a real clock. And if I ever decide to just plug it in and set the time, I'll have myself another clock that will blend in. And I might do that. I might have this have power constantly in my display. That way I have a functioning clock in the middle of my display, which would be completely different than probably most displays out there. So as you can see, it's already done a revolution because I've been talking for about a minute. So next step is to put this thing, put some wires on the back of this and get this thing soldered up. And then we figure out what resistor it needs. I gotta quit dropping things. We need some wire for this now. And here's that spool of wire that I was telling you about. It's 2 strands that are twisted together. That was just a single strand left over. And we're going to cut off a section. Now, like normal, came from the Goodwill. I like to hit in the Goodwill and you'd be surprised what you can find. Again, that's one of the reasons we're called the Random Junk Channel, because we don't necessarily go buy new stuff from stores. Heck, a lot of my Lemax wasn't even new. I buy it secondhand. I'm sure a lot of people do. But I do have new as well. It just depends on what I'm looking for. But Goodwill, garage sales, side of the road, generic thrift stores. Be surprised what you can find if you really have the time to look. And it's not like I spend my days doing it. I just, if I have to stop somewhere while I'm on my job, sometimes we'll stop at a Goodwill or what's the other? Salvation Army. Sometimes we stop at the Restore, which is Habitat for Humanity. Man, you will be surprised what you can find that is relatively cheap. And in today's society, anything that's cheap is amazing. So there is the battery pad has a hole in it, and I'm just prying it away so I can fish the wire through the hole and then fold it over so I can solder it. I'll show you that in just a second. This one has a notch, which I just bent the wire through so I can hold it tight against and solder. That one has a hole in the center, and I just bend it out so I get the wire through and fold it over so I can solder it as well. So I can solder these two on, and then I just have to make a mental note that the yellow and blue is hot, and the blue with a little bit of yellow is not. And sorry for how long this one video is. It's because of the type of change on this. I want you to see as much as I do, as much as you can, so you know the process and know it's not always quick. Of course, if you're doing it and not talking to yourself the whole time, it's probably going to be faster. And if you have your tools in advance set up and your equipment, it's faster. I didn't think I was going to need a Dremel, but I did. So there's that one. I just need something to prop it up so I can actually see the pad and make sure I'm getting solder where I need the solder to be. And it still wasn't where I needed it to be. There we go. All right, so now I have my positive and negative wires attached. As you can see, I can wiggle them. Now it's time to feed everything through. Got one LED in. I think that was the other one. Nope. No, that just fell out. Probably the vibrations cause it to separate. So I can get one light in easily. It's getting that second one in that doesn't want it to go. Might have to use glue, like I was stating I didn't want to, just to keep them in. I see why it's not going in. The one hole has a burr from the cutter, and the other hole doesn't. I'm getting caught on the burr, so I'm going to have to re-Dremel out this one hole real fast. Of course, I have to go get the Dremel, because I already put it away. This hole here, when it went through, the casting sticker on the top, it's not smooth on the inside, it's all wrinkly. And the wrinkly part, it turned, so this hole is actually smaller on the back side than this hole, which is all the way through, is a nice cylinder. which is why the front fits so nicely for alignment and it recesses in like it's supposed to. That's because the front, same size hole. The back, because I'm using a tapered bit, when it punched through at a slight angle and didn't cut through the top casting. So, need to quickly grind that bad boy out real fast, and then we should be good. And I'll get the hot glue gun out, and we'll probably put a dab of glue when I stick it in there so it holds. Just because I'm afraid when I put the clock mechanism in, it's going to fall out. Well, bear with me for a minute. I'll go get a Dremel and do this real fast. All right, it's back together. I figured I'd show it to you. I made a light for it. I have other videos where I make lights, so I can always look at one of the previous videos, or I can make a separate video about the light. There it is inside. See it flickering. And you see the clock's working. So let's see what it looks like in the dark. There's the eyes. Hands are still moving. We got the glow in the back, and we got the glow right here. Kind of it's an orange flicker, kind of give it that old-timey look. I think that's better than the white. I just can't stand pure white light like that in these things. But yeah, there's the process. Here is the back. And I'll turn on the light. So, and I'll turn that light too. Basically, there is a 4.5 millimeter jack adapter. Here's the 4.5 millimeter jack. I have 4 flicker LEDs, orange, with a 100 ohm resistor, because it's all we need. Just like I have a 100 ohm resistor on the red. But the reds are in series, these are in parallel. So being in series, the 2 LEDs together provide extra resistance. There also have to be a higher resistance because red runs at a lower voltage. The clock itself, as you see it stopped because I've unplugged it, is an 820 ohm resistor to convert the 4.5 volts down to a manageable voltage for the clock, so it rotates. So I didn't set the time when I put the hands on. I mean, I could technically set the time just by spinning the hands. Now, I did have to trim the hour and minute hand because the hour hand clears, but the minute hand smacks the 2 reapers. I did glue this back in, and I did glue the bottom back on, and even re-adhered the piece that chipped, that broke off. That's super glue, and I redid this with hot glue, so I can remove this in the future if necessary. I also put a dab of hot glue on the clock, so it doesn't fall out anymore. And then I super glued back on the top of the scythe and hot glued this guy back in since the vibrations caused him to fall out. So, here we go. I have now taken the Be Freyed Clocksmith for 2022 and converted it into a fully functional clock with lights. Better lights than what it came with. So if this would have been something that Lemax produced normally, as an example, this probably would have been a $150 house, I'm guesstimating, if it had LEDs and it had a rotating clock. And if they made it fully functional, like some other companies may do, I'm figuring the price point would probably be around 150 bucks. So, clock, the one I had to go buy. The miscellaneous small stuff that you have to buy in large quantities. The glue stick, to glue it all together if you want to add that as material. And of course, the purchase price of the house. I'm into this thing, 60 bucks. So I got the house cheap. I had a credit with Gift Spice, so I was able to get the house cheap because I cashed in my rewards. So if you bought the house at full price and you decided to do it, the mechanism was about $11, but I got it for $6 because I'm a Michael's Rewards member and I had a $5 voucher. This is $50, and I got it for delivered for $42. So I'm literally into this for $60 or less. But I'm into it for a couple hours of time. But now I have a different piece than everybody else. So there it is, the Be Freyed Clocksmith, converted from a fake clock with solid plastic hands to a fully functional clock that you can set up in your display as an all year round clock, or just during the Halloween season. Mine's all year round, so it'll be on all year round. The LEDs, they're low powered. This whole thing, believe it or not, is drawing about 1/4 of an amp. So it's really, really, really low powered. The other clock I made was about the same. I think it was like 1/3 of an amp because it had more lights. This only has 6. I think the other one I made had 8 or 9. But anyhow, there you go. Hopefully this was educational enough that maybe you want to try something like this if you really do. If not, just something that you can see that you have options to modify things and make them your own. So I thought about painting the hands black, but you know, silver and brass is fine. Everything works. That's all I care. I'll set the time once I put her in my display, and I'll have it wired to an always on wall socket, so that way it's always on. And then I can look at the time when I'm in my Lemax room, as it's called. So, all right, well, thanks for watching. Until the next one, thanks.